Hey guys, Tom Shue here, and today we're going to be doing a quick tutorial on levels and curves. What's the difference between the two, and how does it work? That's the big question, is how does it work? Well, first of all, let's talk about what a digital file is. And to do that, we need to look at our histogram. Our file, digital file, is a scale from 0 to 255. Okay? So if I come over here and you look at where it says level, it has representation of 0, that's a solid black. And if I come over here to the right, 255, okay, this is a solid white. Now it tells you the count, how many pixels high it is. So this is like pixels from 0 to the height, okay? So there's millions of pixels represented in this box. Each one of these little squares, if you could zoom in far enough, is represented. So let's do that. So let's zoom in and see what a pixel is. That little square is represented by a little square somewhere in here in this box, okay? And so if you go 255 times the height of this, it tells you how many pixels are on the screen. That's it. Let me zoom back out here. So you have channels. You have a luminosity, which this is just the luminance, like the exposure from a black point to a white point and everything in between. If your little curve goes above the top of this rectangle, it's clipped. Do you see this little arch right here? It's saying there's something in the screen that's in the whites. It's solid white without detail. However, it is going to go to the top and be without detail. There's some detail in it now. It's beginning to clip, and if it goes to the top, it would be a solid point without detail. If we come over here and we look, we can see that at level 25 to level 40, because I'm trying to look at the top here and measure myself down. Okay, between 40 and 25, all those levels are clipped because they're off the top of the scale, right? So this is how this works. You got your red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, and you have your luminosity. Combine them all together, you have colors, is what they call it. Okay, so let's look at levels, what they are. Here's levels. Levels is the same thing, 0 to 255, so it's represented from the darks to the lights, but it lets you define where is what. That sounds weird. Where is what? It lets you define where your black point is and where your white point is. So if I bring this over here to say like 20, okay, 21, all right, it's saying that there's no 0, there's no solid black point in the image. The only area there is, it stops at 21, which is this shade of gray. We'll pull it over here. Whatever that shade of gray above this is the darkest it's going to be in the image, which happens to be level 31. Here's level 20. The darkest point in the image is going to be level 20, and the whitest portion of the image is going to be this shade of, let's pull it over here, this shade of gray right above that point, which is level 178. So basically we've taken our black point and our white point and we squished them in and saying there's not going to be anything brighter than this in the white, and there's not going to be anything darker than this in the dark. So if your image is going to be full range, you want it to have a black point and you want it to have a white point, because that gives you the most range you can have in a file. It's a rich photograph if it has a white point and a black point. That's why when you make a picture, a lot of people have a hard time doing this. When they shoot a picture and they try to expose and get a good exposure, their shadows might not be dark enough. Or if they expose for the shadow area to get a good shadow, the highlights, they look terrible. You know, it's not bright enough because the camera sensor cannot capture full range, fully black point and a full white point. So the trick is to expose to the right and get your highlight information looking good, you know, like your cloud information, all that stuff in the sky looking good, because it's real easy just to drag down and make a dark point. There's nothing at all to that. However, if you shot just for the shadow area, you can't pull up and make a bright point without getting a bunch of noise. Just a little FYI there. Alright, so here we are with our levels. Again, remember we said our black point here and our white point here. Same thing as on the histogram, because it is a histogram, and you notice here's your histogram. That's all this is. Every one of these adjustments can only manipulate a luminance value or a color value within this box here. So if you think about it that way, you can understand what these tools are doing. So once you've defined your points, we're going to leave them full range, 0 and 255. We can say, okay, we want to add our black point. We want to move it over a little bit. We want our blacks to start at 16 now, okay? And we want our whites to be full white at 234. Or I want my whites to be white at 174. So now I'm pushing them in, right? The one you're going to use the most is the mid-range value, okay? Because it gives you the most control over the majority of the information or the feel of the image. So now if I want my overall exposure to look like that, I can either brighten it up a little bit in the highlight area, and I can create more contrast by bringing in my blacks. That's how levels works. There's some presets. So say, for example, I go to default. That's where my image is without any adjustment, and I wanted to increase the contrast. There's 3 levels of increasing contrast, which means that I'm increasing the relationship between the dark and the light. Watch what's going with the points. Increase 3. It's pushing the points in further. Okay. Let's go back to default. Now if I say I want my image lighter, okay, now it's doing the same thing. It's pushing these points around and creating a situation based on this preset. I want to make my midtones brighter. There we have it. It's using these sliders as a preset. Alright, let's go to curves, my preferred method. Now you notice the histogram's got these lines in it, in this little triangle with the exclamation point. It's saying to you, hey, this is not an actual representation of the histogram. It's a preview that needs to be refreshed. So you can double click here, or you can hit this little circle that's refresh. Now you're getting an actual representation of what the histogram looks like. Alright, just so you know. So let's go ahead and hide this one, and let's grab a curves adjustment. Curves does the same thing. You notice that we have this background information here. That is your histogram. It's in a square instead of a rectangle, but all the levels are there. We got 0 and 255. If you look at the bottom down here, output level 0, input level, let's see here, boom, boom, boom. Now it's showing me that for the whole curve, this point to this point, what's the levels, all right? So it's going to give me an adjustment left to right. If I just make a point here, I'm going to affect the midtones because I'm in the middle of that histogram. So watch, if I pull this down, I'm making the midtones darker, and if I push this up, I'm making the midtones brighter. However, it's also affecting the highlights and the shadows, because do you see how that curve rolls off? It's pulling up the information at these different levels. We know this is 0. Anywhere between this point right here, which is directly in the middle of 0 to 255, it's creating an adjustment, a roll-off down to black. Let's pull this point off and get rid of that. So if I make a point here, and I come here and I make a point, 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 it's going to pin it so it can't roll off. And if I just bring up this midtone area, it only affects the midtones between this point and that point. You see? So it's a more specific adjustment. Okay? Let me go ahead and put this to default. Alright? You can go into your red channel, your green channel, and your blue channel. So this is where the strength is for me, because I can use a color wheel. If I want to take red away or add red, right? I can control what's going on in my image independently on each channel. So I want to go to the blue channel, and I want to add more blue, or I can take more blue away. Go to the green channel, same thing. I can take green away. And so I have full control over color as well as exposure all in one slider. Now when you combine that with the ability to use a mask, it makes life real easy. If you want to invert this, take away the effects, you want to hide everything. If you hold down the control key and hit I, and that's the command key on the Mac, once you've got your layer mask selected, see we can hide that. And then we can use our brush tool, and we can change our opacity to say somewhere around 20% maybe. And let's make a soft brush. I can come in here and paint. Let me make sure we're painting with white. I can come here and paint the effect in from that curves layer. And I can get an exact control of what I want to add based on my adjustment. Okay, so there's the before and there's the after. So I've settled down the image and I've done what I wanted to do. It's a more exacting control. Curves is to me is a tool I go to most of the time. However, I do use levels, and hopefully this video helps explain the difference between the two. Sorry it ran to around 11 minutes, but sometimes you've got to do what you got to do. I want to thank you all for taking time to visit today, and until next time, we'll see you soon.